For Throwback Thursday this week, we will be exploring Selkirk, Ontario and their historical landmarks. Plus, we will learn how to make butter right at home. The first landmark is the Selkirk Community Centre. The Selkirk Community Centre was once a 3-classroom union school that opened in September of 1918. The upstairs had 3 classrooms, a teacher's room, a library, 2 cloakrooms, and a large hall. The basement had 2 playrooms, 2 lunchrooms, and a large room near the front. In 1922, the continuation school was established by turning the basement playrooms into classrooms and the front room into a science lab. This school had grades 1 through 12 and was used until 1949. In 1967, the school was turned into the Centennial Center and used by residents for a library and community hall, which it still is today. The next landmark in Selkirk we will be discussing is the Bank of Hamilton. This was originally a private bank owned by R.J. Wynyard, who came to the village in 1864. It was taken over by the Bank of Hamilton in 1906 and has remained a bank until a few years back. This safe was delivered to the Bank of Hamilton in 1906 when it was first opened. The next landmark is where the Sunflower Cafe is today. This was once the Selkirk Deli and Family Restaurant, and at one point there was a butter factory there. Later it had many other uses, including a drugstore, a bake shop, a billiard hall, post office, and even a barber shop. Now it is home to the lovely Sunflower Cafe, which has amazing food. The next landmark is Lindsay Home Hardware. The home hardware store was originally a tinsmith shop for 37 years, making a variety of items. In later years, they began to sell hardware. The business was bought by Russell Hurst and Grant Lindsay, who operated it as L&H Hardware. Once the partnership was sold to Grant's son Bill in 1964, they operated it as Lindsay Home Hardware until 2009. The home hardware was rebuilt on Concession 3. The Wilson McDonald Memorial School Museum is dedicated to preserving the history of rural education, the heritage of the community, and the memory of poet Wilson Pugsley McDonald. This one-room schoolhouse was built in 1872 and was in operation until 1966. In 1967, the building reopened as Wilson Pugsley McDonald Memorial School Museum, dedicated to the famous poet who was born in Cheapside. This museum gives you the opportunity to step into the classroom of 1925. Unfortunately, this summer, Wilson McDonald is under renovations, but we visited the museum and got to learn how they used to make butter in the 1800s. And here's how.
Hi, my name is Angelina. I'm a pioneer child from 1872. I remember very fondly my journey here. My mom and my sister were very scared for the trip ahead, but my dad and I were really excited for the adventures. We traveled by horse and wagon, and it was so cold sometimes that we'd have to huddle together and use lots of blankets just to stay warm. It was a really long journey. Sometimes we didn't even know if it would end. And we met a lot of people along the way. They're also looking to start their homesteads and find land, because that was a big thing back then. You had to move and find places. And so one day we came to a small village called Cheapside, and my dad said, this is it. This is where we are going to build our home. And yeah, so we began by clearing our land, and we built a log cabin, a barn, and a stable. And so each of us were very busy with our own chores, and so my little sister and I, before school every morning, would go out and see the chickens. We'd feed them and collect their eggs, and then after school we would have to do our homework, and we'd have to help Dad milk the cow, Betsy. She was very old and kind of liked to kick you sometimes, so you had to be careful around her. So then on weekends we'd hang out with Mom, and she'd teach us how to cook and how to sew, and well, my favorite, making butter. So today we are going to be using the churn. So we didn't have this at our house. We had a big wooden, almost like a pail with a cover and a stick that you'd have to mix to turn up all the fats and stuff. But back, like way back, they used to use lamb skin or like goat skin, and they'd hang it from the ceiling, and they would shake it, just like get the fat separated. Okay, so you're gonna fill your jar half full with heavy cream or 35%. That's good.
That's enough?
Yep.
Perfect. And then I put the lid on?
Uh-huh. Make sure it's tight because you're going to be shaking pretty hard.
All right.
Now all you're going to do is shake, and so it'll go through a couple phases. First it'll turn to like a heavy whipping cream, then it'll almost turn solid, and then you keep shaking, and once you hear a ball form in the middle, that's when you can shake for just like 30 to 60 seconds, and then you gotta drain all your extra fats out, and you got butter.
All right.
So to strain it, you can either use, so we use the cheesecloth, but today we're just gonna use the more modern technique of the strainer. You gotta use a lot of cream for this one. To make your butter different kinds, you can add garlic or salt or honey or whatever you want. If you're doing the salted one, you're gonna have to put the salt in after, but most of them you just mix it in when you're starting. So for the mason jar one, you're gonna have to shake for about 5 to 7 minutes, depending how hard you shake.
I think it's done.
Wanna try straining it?
Yes.
Okay, so we pour it into here. Okay, so if you wanna put it into the strainer, after your butter is done, you gotta kind of clean it a bit. So you take some cold water, you do this 3 times, just pour it over, shake it up a little bit. And then, whatever kind of container or parchment paper you're keeping it on, you put it in there, shape it, and you got butter. And that is your butter. I'll wash it down a few times. There's any fat that's left in it. All right, and then you got your butter.
That is so good. Take a look at this mystery object and let us know what you think it is for the chance to win. Or send us a photo of the butter you made this week.